Today is Monday, March 17th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. The U.S. is currently fighting with Iranian-backed militants. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're getting through the news of the day here each and every weekday, bright and early. We're so glad you're here with us. And joining me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell. Billy, on the focus story, a Florida mom fighting back against the Florida school district after her daughter experienced gender confusion.
Yeah, this is January Littlejohn. We saw her during Trump's speech. She was there. She's going to break down her story. We'll give you all the details today.
All right, looking forward to the details there coming up in just a moment on the focus story. On the main thing, Columbia graduate Mahmoud Khalil remains in ICE detention for supporting terrorist organizations. Ilya Shapiro explains why the government's actions are illegal under the U.S. immigration law. All that's coming up. The news in 90 is coming up next, right after this.
Let me tell you, the God's gonna cut you.
It's Holy Week in Jerusalem, and the city is restless. The people of Israel welcome Jesus as king, his followers ready for revolution. But instead of taking the throne, Jesus turns the tables.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees! How will you escape being condemned to hell?
Experience Holy Week like never before.
What have you done?
Coming soon to theaters, The Chosen, Last Supper. Get your tickets now.
A powerful storm swept across multiple U.S. states over the weekend. Tornadoes, wildfires, dust storms even, resulting in at least 40 deaths. Missouri experienced the highest death toll, 12 fatalities due to scattered tornadoes, thunderstorms, and hail. Alabama also reported multiple tornadoes with 3 deaths. Mississippi had 6 people die. 3 individuals are still missing. In total, 40 tornadoes were reported across 8 states. Texas and Oklahoma also battled rapid wildfires, with Oklahoma reporting 130 separate fires. Dust storms in Kansas and Texas led to multiple deaths as well, including an 8-car pileup in Kansas. As the storm moves eastward, severe weather alerts have been issued for parts of Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, and other states. The U.S. has intensified its military campaign against Yemen's backed Houthi militants following continued attacks on commercial and military vessels in the Red Sea. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made it clear that the strikes will continue until the Houthis halt their assaults on global shipping, which have disrupted vital trade routes. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And man, it's some crazy weather going on across the country right now, and it seems like every now and then you just get these spates of tornadoes. And I mean, seeing dust storms, though, made me think of the 1930s or something in the Dust Bowl. But obviously be extra cautious if you're finding yourself in the path of these coming storms in Pennsylvania or North Carolina or some of these other states that have been mentioned. You know, I think we can take for granted sometimes the safety we have, and then weather pops up and you're unprepared and craziness happens. That's a lot of weather-related fatalities here over a weekend. So definitely praying for everyone involved there, and want everybody to be careful going forward and keeping an eye out on the weather in your neck of the woods. All right, we're going to head to the focus story right now. And as Billy just mentioned moments ago, a Florida mom is fighting back against a Florida school district after her daughter had experienced some gender confusion. So Billy, what's the story here?
Yeah, this is a story that got some attention during Trump's joint speech before Congress earlier this month. Her name is January Littlejohn. We had a chance to speak with her, and you'll be able to watch this full interview over on the CBN News YouTube channel very soon, later this week. But January told us that this sort of nightmare started for her family at the height of COVID in 2020. She said her daughter fell prey to the lies of gender identity ideology and started thinking that she was born in the wrong body. And this started around May of 2020. And it happened after some of her daughter's friends at a local middle school also started to identify as some form of transgender. And so she said at the time the family didn't know much about this issue. They didn't really know much about what she called the social contagion. They knew that their daughter was struggling. And initially, they were sort of trusting the school and officials with the Leon County school system. She said, like so many parents, I trusted the school. I had no reason at that time not to. And in fact, I was volunteer of the year at the school. I was a huge proponent for public schools and teachers. And she talked about how she dedicated a lot of time to volunteering in the classroom. So she ended up reaching out to her daughter's teacher and disclosed what was happening, that her daughter was struggling. She told the teacher that the family was not affirming any kind of false sexual identity and that they were trying to get a counselor to help. So they were sort of going to the school, reportedly being open about what was going on. She said, we did know that our child was struggling and we were very concerned as her parents because nobody loves and knows their child more than the parents do. And she said they were trying to handle this issue as a family. But what ended up happening was something she said was very, very disturbing. She said that without her consent, and this is her claim, the school district met with her daughter without her knowledge. So here she went to the school and said, hey, this issue's going on. But she claims they then met with the daughter without the parents' knowledge and started asking questions about restrooms and other things. And she's like, look, I thought we were discussing my child using a nickname. She said 2 weeks later, my 13-year-old daughter gets in the car and tells me that she had a meeting at school and that they asked what restroom she wanted to use. And so the parents were alarmed. They reach out to the school and they were like, why were we not invited into this meeting? And why are you asking about restrooms and other things? I thought this was, again, just about, a nickname that my daughter wanted to use at school. So I'll sort of stop there. But what ended up happening was that the parents were not able to get access, they claim, for weeks to this plan that was apparently set up with the school and the daughter about how she wanted to be referred to. It was, I guess, a quote unquote support plan that the parents wanted access to. And so this has erupted into essentially a legal battle that has been going on since 2021 when the parents filed a lawsuit.
Yeah. And how common are these? I mean, this is quite alarming, but is it super rare? Are we seeing more of these? What's the deal there?
Well, the big issue here is that the claim is that this creates a wedge between, the children and the parents, right, in this case. And so Bernadette Broyles, she's an attorney. She's actually the president of the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. She also represents Little John and the family. She said these battles are happening all over the country. And Little John said the same thing. Little John's become an activist, which is why she was at that speech that Trump gave. But Bernadette said, we talk to parents all over the country. We have 5 other federal lawsuits right now. So this is something that her law firm is dealing with quite a bit. And this is, they said this is happening in districts across America.
What's the current state of this battle, this legal battle? Where is it sitting right now?
Yeah, it's interesting because Little John said that, this started, remember, in the fall of 2020 when the issues started, and it wasn't until October of 2021 that they filed their lawsuit. She said, I want to make it very clear to your audience that we tried very hard to resolve this issue with the school district. Filing a lawsuit was never even on our mind when this first happened, but she felt the district wasn't going to stop. So actually, as we're having this conversation right now, this legal battle is sort of paused right now because Little John has actually, they've lost twice now. Their lawsuit was dismissed. And after her discussion with us, so they were sort of waiting for this decision. It was a couple weeks ago that we talked. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals issued a 2-1 decision again against the Little Johns. The decision upheld a previous ruling that dismissed the parents' lawsuit. And it's interesting because, and I'll just read a little bit from the law firm that represents Little John. The panel concluded that the Little Johns failed to meet the shock the conscience standard that the panel claimed was required to challenge violations of their parental rights by Leon County schools. And so right now it looks like her legal team, they're making decisions about what to do. Is there another appeal? Can they move forward in some way? But apparently it didn't reach the standard that it needed to, the constitutional standard, in order for that lawsuit to stand. So right now it's at a standstill, the lawsuit.
Jeez, the shock the conscience standard. That sounds seems like a low bar to hit, to have parents be able to get in there and be able to fend for their own children there. And man, what a shocking. I mean, to me, it shocks my conscience that the school thinks that they're better off to discuss these things outside of the parents' purview. And again, this is like kind of a problematic worldview between a lot of progressive mentality within the schools, within the public schools, that they really truly believe that they are the stewards of these kids and that their parents do not have the ultimate authority over these kids, that they do. And it's actions like these that kind of reveal that that's what they think. And it's quite disturbing to think that you're going to send your kid off there and they're going to have these closed door meetings about issues like this and try to guide you in a certain direction when that's not at all what that school should be doing. But again, I think it's why you see a big rise in homeschooling. It's why you see a rise in people trying to go to private schools or get school choice passed so that they can have financial assistance from their tax money, not assistance from outside, but basically my tax dollars that are used to pay for the public schools. Can I put those towards a different education than this public school system? I think that's why you're seeing a rise in all of these things, because people feel like the school has gone too far in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Well, and I think, this case, the shock the conscience piece, I'm not a constitutional attorney. I think one of the issues is that the feeling was that, well, it didn't, and this is so interesting. There was no harm, there was no actual harm in this case, right? That the daughter, I think the district changed their policy later. The daughter ended up growing out of this, is no longer reportedly struggling with these issues. And the school district didn't act with malice. They go through all these different things, and it has to do with that individual case. But to me, I think it's interesting, the threat of losing your parental rights, because Little John said this drove a wedge from her perspective between her and her daughter, that threat alone should be, considered viable. And it's interesting. It's a 2-1 decision. So it's a 3-panel, they were divided. The one judge was pretty staunch that this was an issue and should be addressed. So it wasn't as though all 3 of them agreed with each other. It was 2-1, and one of them was pretty strong on this being an issue. So I'm interested to see what they do next, because she is Trump called her out by name. She stood up during the speech. She was invited to be there. So she's a pretty big advocate in this arena. So I'm interested to see what happens next.
Yeah. And listen, the culture at large has sort of caved on this issue over the last few years, but you're seeing people, and President Trump being one of them, kind of stand up to this agenda going on against our young kids, where you see the numbers of people identifying as transgender just exploding. And it's sort of like, well, why? Is it because all of a sudden we have lots more transgender individuals? No, it's because people are out there on TikTok and they're on social media and they're pushing this stuff every single day. And so you've got kids then thinking, probably who never otherwise would have thought such things, are saying, well, I guess I'm transgender now, or I'm she, they, and all these pronouns. And it's some way of making yourself appear special, like maybe if you're a hurting child or something. And so you have these sudden numbers and this sudden rise in all this stuff. And so it's become an issue. And I think people have sat by silently long enough that they've probably had enough of it. And I think President Trump is certainly tapping into that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, he has no reason to, outside of wanting to address the issue. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, right, that he's made this decision now. So it'll be interesting to see what he does next too.
Yeah, definitely will. Definitely will. All right. Appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast on our radar today, Billy. Look forward to that full interview coming on the CBN News YouTube channel very soon. All right. Mahmoud Khalil, detained by ICE. How are these actions legal and not a violation of free speech? Ilya Shapiro explains in 30 seconds.
Let me tell you, the God's gonna cut you.
It's Holy Week in Jerusalem. Crowds welcome Jesus as king. Rebellion is in the air.
Jesus operates outside our jurisdiction.
Rome will descend on us all.
But instead of taking the throne, Jesus turns the tables.
My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of thieves.
The world will never be the same. Coming soon to theaters, The Chosen Last Supper. Get your tickets now.
All right. Appreciate our friends over at The Chosen for sponsoring the Quick Start podcast. And that's going to lead us to the main thing now. Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil remains in ICE detention for repeatedly expressing support for terrorist organizations, including Hamas. Ilya Shapiro, senior fellow and director of constitutional studies at the Manhattan Institute, joined Madison Seals to explain why the government's actions are illegal and in line with U.S. immigration law. That conversation is today's main thing.
Well, Ilya, for those who haven't been keeping up with this story, who is Mahmoud Khalil? What were his actions leading up to being arrested, and why was he ultimately detained?
Sure. The Immigration and Nationality Act, which sets out the rules for who can come into this country, for how long, for what purpose, says that foreigners, aliens in the technical legal term, are inadmissible if they've done certain things, committed crimes, supported the communists, the Nazis, or other authoritarian parties, provided support for terrorism, otherwise engage in certain activities that are detrimental to the national interest. And it's those latter couple of things that I mentioned that have gotten Mahmoud Khalil in trouble. He is from Syria. He's apparently a Palestinian from Syria who was on a student visa to attend Columbia. Then he got a green card, and he was one of the organizers of the various protests, disruptions, building takeovers, vandalism, intimidation that went on at Columbia University last year. And so he's now coming before a judge to evaluate whether the government has indeed proven that he is inadmissible, meaning that his visa is revocable, including his green card. And that's it in a nutshell.
And a group of 14 Democrats signed a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem urging her to release Khalil. What grounds are people protesting his arrest on, and is there any merit in them?
His supporters are saying that he is simply being persecuted for his speech, and we might not like his speech, but he shouldn't be punished for it. The thing is, nobody can be or is being punished for their speech. He is not being, nor can he be prosecuted for saying things that, say, are pro-Hamas. Instead, this is the enforcement of immigration regulations. And some people do argue that some of these immigration provisions might be unconstitutional because they're related to showing support for an organization rather than actually engaging in criminal activity. But when you think about it, the U.S. government, like any government, can set rules about the types of people it wants in the country, and those include people who want to undermine our system of government, our way of life, who have an ideological agenda that is antithetical to America, and that's what's going on here. So I think at the end of the day, whenever this is all resolved through appellate courts, maybe even the Supreme Court, who knows? I think the government will prevail here, and they probably picked him because he's one of the leaders of these protests. So rather than kind of just sweeping up a lot of foreign students who were part of these pro-Hamas demonstrations of various kinds, they went straight for one of the leaders.
When it comes to immigration law, what can make someone in the United States eligible for deportation?
Immigration proceedings are not criminal. They are a determination of whether someone has violated the various rules. And I'll refer to your listeners, if they really want to be nerdy about this, to 8 U.S.C. 1182 about inadmissible aliens and 8 U.S.C. 1227. Those are the parts of the U.S. code that are most relevant. So aliens are inadmissible for various health reasons, if they can be a public health problem, if they're not vaccinated sufficiently, if they've been convicted of certain crimes of moral turpitude, what's called, or multiple criminal convictions, or if they're drug traffickers, if they've been involved in commercialized vice or prostitutions. Lots of things like this. Violations of foreign government officials who have been involved in money laundering or violations of religious liberty. Terrorist activities. Is a representative of an organization, is a member of a supporting group or a financial group. So lots of things like that, as well as committing various actions deemed against the national interest, against the national security interest, and courts generally defer to the executive branch, the president, the secretary of state, the relevant law enforcement officials on that score. So again, there's going to be, because he has a green card, Khalil is entitled to and is receiving judicial process. If it was just a student visa, then you'd get a letter in the mail from the Department of Homeland Security, and that's about it. But because he's a green card holder, he gets more due process, and the government has to show to the judge's satisfaction that Khalil has indeed engaged in one of these activities or behaviors that makes one inadmissible and therefore removable if in the country.
Did we learn anything new from the hearings or from the attorneys on Wednesday?
Not that I've seen. I mean, these are all preliminary scuffles. We see the outlines of the arguments. Khalil's attorneys, in addition to saying that all he's doing is speaking, are saying that he is being singled out, that he's being treated differently, and that he's merely engaged in speech that's against Israel, not pro-Hamas. I think the way those demonstrations work, that's a distinction without a difference, but the judge is going to sort all of that out.
And after his hearing, Khalil was taken to an ICE detention facility in Louisiana and is expected to remain there for the time being. Do you think it's more likely that he's deported or released back into the U.S.? What are your thoughts on that?
I think in the long run, it's more likely that he will be stripped of his green card and deported. But it might take a while, and there might be some appeals. I think the administration has been savvy in picking him. They've forced Democrats and activists to defend someone who's really unpopular. To make him be the leader of one of the most violent protests, one of the most disruptive protests, the one that got the most national attention, the takeover of that building, the injury to that janitor at Columbia last spring. I think it's smart to go after him, even if he has a green card, and thus it'll take longer than just to sweep up a bunch of students that happen to be involved at Columbia or anywhere else. I think at the end of the day, this is going to, again, more likely than not, set a strong precedent.
All right, Madison, appreciate that conversation there. That's going to leave us with time on the pod today for one last thing.
We have 1 Timothy 6:12, fight the good fight of the faith, take hold of the eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses. And just that idea of fighting the good fight of the faith, it's not always easy, but we got to keep fighting it, and we got to remember it is a fight, right? It requires our efforts.
Yes, amen. Good spot to leave it. Kick off this week. This Monday edition of the Quick Start podcast. As always, get yourself on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. And Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. Until then, God bless. Have a fantastic rest of your Monday.